It was a cold, wet, miserable evening in March 1811, when a group of frustrated, disgruntled textile workers decided they had had enough. They marched onto the village of Arnold in Nottinghamshire, and cheered on by the local crowds, they started going from factory to factory, smashing up the equipment inside. And this started 6 years of riot and rebellion across Britain, where similar groups would go from town to town, from factory to factory, vandalizing what they found inside. These people were doing this for one reason. They were scared for their future. They were scared for their jobs. They saw the automation, they saw the steam and the coal and all the things that were happening in the world, and they knew that the jobs that they and their parents and their grandparents and generations before had done, they knew that those jobs were over, that new jobs were coming to replace them. And they didn't know what that meant for them. We call this group of people the Luddites. And we look back on them now, and history doesn't look kindly on them. We think that they were against progress, that they were against technology, that they couldn't see the wonders of the Industrial Revolution that were going to happen. And we even use the word Luddite as a little bit of an insult. If you haven't got the latest smartphone, Luddite. Not on Snapchat, Luddite. There's a new revolution coming, the artificial intelligence revolution. And the secret is I'm a little bit of a Luddite. Not in the Snapchat sense, although I don't have Snapchat, but in the traditional sense. You see, I'm afraid of what's going to happen to people's jobs. I'm afraid of what artificial intelligence means for the world. AI is really hyped by the media. Everywhere you look, you hear about artificial intelligence at the moment. Every time there's a game where a computer beats a human, the media screams as if the robots are about to take over. When Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov, or when Jeopardy was finally conquered by IBM Watson. More recently in the news, we've heard about how DeepMind's solution has conquered Go. We have this sort of perverse desire to find computers that are smarter than us. But the reality is that actually, for the last 20 years, artificial intelligence has been slowly permeating into our society and into our world in much quieter ways. The spam filter that looks at the email coming in, the GPS system that you use to navigate your car, the fraud protection system that protects your credit card transactions, or the medical diagnosis system, the Google search, or that advert that's a little bit eerily too tailored to you. All of these are examples of artificial intelligence in the real world. And they're all examples of how AI is using digital data to make conclusions about what's happening. But over the last 5 to 10 years, things have really started changing and improving. A new technique called deep learning has come along, which means we can take any problem, any input set, and through really teaching a computer to learn, we can find a solution to it. So let's take an example. Close your eyes. Actually close them. And imagine in your mind a snowy scene. And imagine a cute little fluffy puppy. You can just see its face in the snow. Next to it is a cute little fluffy kitten. If I asked you to describe to me which one's the kitten and which one's the puppy and why that is and how you know that, you'd actually find it extremely difficult. If you tried to explain it to a computer using mathematical terms, you would most definitely find it impossible. And for decades, people have been trying to work out how we can solve problems like this, how we can get computers to understand what things actually are and what they mean. And what deep learning has done is it's changed the equation. It's allowed us to build learning systems that can learn like humans. The way deep learning works is we pass into a system hundreds, thousands of photos of dogs, of cats, of pigeons, of lions, and we let the computer work out what's what. We tell it this is a cat and this is a dog, but we let the computer work out what that means. And that's just how we teach humans. If you think about how you would teach a child what a kitten or a puppy is, you would show it to them. You would show them books with a cute kitten or a cute puppy. You'd take them to the park and they would see those things. And they would learn what these things are, what they mean. And that's what deep learning does. And deep learning, because of this ability to learn any problem, is doing more interesting things than being able to differentiate between a cat and a dog. It can tell us just by looking whether that mole is cancerous or whether it's benign. It can tell whether the words that we're using are friendly or whether they're hostile. It can understand what you mean when you're talking to Alexa, or it can understand which biomolecules we want when we need to fight the Ebola virus that's spreading through the world. In complex systems, like a self-driving car, it can understand which way to turn the steering wheel or whether you push on the accelerator or the brake pedal. And all of these are just doing the same things. They're looking at an image, they're learning what that image means, and they're being able to recognize and detect things in it. These are now systems that are no longer just interacting with digital data like emails or GPS coordinates, but interacting with sensory data, with things that they can see and things that they can hear. These systems can learn anything that we can learn. That doesn't mean they're intelligent in the same way as humans. It doesn't mean that they have creativity or rational behavior. But it does mean that if we can teach something to a child or even an adult, we can now teach it to a deep learning system. In parallel to all this, we've seen massive improvements in robotics. I urge you all after this to go and look up a robot called Atlas. Atlas has been in development for many years, and there are lots of videos that come out. It started off as a humanoid 6-foot robot that could go into a factory and start stacking shelves. And today it can now still do that, but it can also jump upstairs and backflip significantly better than me off a box. If you compare what deep learning can do and you bring it to these advances in robotics, it's clear to see that AI can very quickly start to replace jobs. So then there's an obvious question of will it? Well, when you think that this warehouse worker is not going to need any sick leave or lunch breaks, when you think you can sack that HR department and you don't need any health and safety requirements anymore, it suddenly becomes quite obvious why a factory or a warehouse would choose to have robots, not people. They also have advantages like you can patch every single robot with the same software upgrade at once. If you've got one worker at the moment that's a bit annoying or keeps making the same mistake, you can maybe give them education and help try and fix them, but that doesn't help fix everyone else in that workshop or warehouse when they get stuff wrong. With these systems, you teach one thing and they all learn. And there is a real sense of collective learning here. When you're born, that's you. All of your experiences, all of your learning are then yourself. With these self-driving cars, for example, the reason that they've come on so quickly is because every single road a self-driving car drives down, it's not just it that's learning about that road. Every other car is learning about that road. Every time somebody bashes into the back of a car, which has happened, all of these other cars learn from that mistake. There's a hive mind going on between all these systems. So it's obvious to me and to anyone in this field that big companies very quickly are going to start embracing and using this technology. So we know that already Amazon are trying to have drones instead of delivery people. And we know as soon as the technology is ready that they'll sack their 400,000 warehouse workers and replace them with robots. Uber have already said that they want to get rid of 3 million of their taxi drivers and replace them with self-driving cars. And why wouldn't they? Every single taxi trip will have 100% gross margin for that company forever from that point. And once that happens, everyone else will have to follow suit to be able to keep up. A company that's got a workforce of 100 people can't financially compete with an equivalent company that pays no one. There are lots of studies into this at the moment. And most of these studies are showing that between 10 and 50% of jobs are vulnerable to this sort of AI robotic automation over the next 20 to 25 years. And that's all sorts of jobs. It's not just the obvious jobs that you think of. It's not just the warehouse worker or the production line staff or the taxi driver. I have the privilege of working with some of the smartest doctors in the world on some of the most complex problems. And when I recently went to dinner with them and I asked them whether they thought they would be replaceable in the next 15, 20 years, they were very quick to tell me about how important empathy is and how important their creative problem solving is. But they're also very open that actually a lot of what they do is just procedural. It's stuff they learnt at medical school and they've learnt through their career, and now they're just applying that knowledge. Think about yourself. If you went to A&E, accident and emergency, and you think you might have a broken leg, the doctor will ask some questions. They'll sort of prod and probe a little bit. They'll take you down to the X-ray room where you'll get an X-ray and they'll bring you back. They'll add those different things together and give you a diagnosis. They'll then tell you in the kindest way about, yes, you've got a broken leg, you're out of sport for the next 2 years. And they'll know that if they tell me that, that probably matters less than if they tell a professional athlete that. That last bit is very human, it's very empathetic. But everything else they're doing is a practical, formulaic system. that can be and will be automated. So AI will replace jobs. Now, economists have a phrase they use, and that phrase is the Luddite fallacy. It echoes back to the Luddites we talked about at the beginning. And it says, actually, we shouldn't fear for loss of jobs. The Luddites were wrong. It's not that jobs disappear, it's that when some jobs go, technology brings other jobs instead. There's a change of composition of jobs in the economy. That was true in the Industrial Revolution. If a weaver saw a new weaving machine, a loom, that was 10, 100 times faster than it, the weaver would be out of work. But somebody would then need to maintain and build the loom itself. So they could just quickly retrain and move into a different factory. Britain of old used to be powered by horses. Every transportation would be riding on a horse. Suddenly, steam trains and modern transportation came along. What happened to the stable boys that were there shoveling out the horses' muck every night? Well, they went into the trains and started filling those with coal instead. We used to have these great things in Britain that I sort of wish we still had, which were called knocker-uppers, who would walk down the street tapping a window at an allotted time to get you up for work. Someone then invented the alarm clock, which must have really annoyed them. But those people then just moved onto the production lines making alarm clocks. The Industrial Revolution didn't destroy jobs. It changed the jobs. It changed the composition of jobs in the workforce. But this won't happen with artificial intelligence. If we're saying that AI and modern robotics are going to be able to replace any doing bits of jobs, then just because there's a new doing bit of a job coming instead, an AI will just do that. If Uber makes 3 million of its taxi drivers redundant, they're not suddenly going to train to be software developers so they can manage the self-driving cars. They won't have the skills, the education, the knowledge to be able to do that. And even if they did, we don't need 3 million new software developers. Microsoft Windows only has 5,000 people working on it, and it powers half the computers in the world. So what will happen to these people? What does this mean for society? Well, it opens up some very scary questions. If we're saying 10 to 50% of jobs are vulnerable in 25 years, that's 500 million to 2.5 billion jobs that are going to go. Where do we find 2.5 billion new jobs? And if we find that, how do we train, how do we educate 2.5 billion people to go and do those jobs? Our education system isn't set up for this. We teach skills, we teach knowledge, we teach vocation. What we don't teach is how to learn. What we don't teach is creativity and critical thinking. And how can we build economies that can actually cope with this? Economies are built on production. The companies that output the most, the countries that output the most are the countries that win. When the output is done by robotics and what humans are doing is the creativity and the critical thinking, what does that mean for an economy? And what happens to the people if we can't do this? What if there aren't 2.5 billion new jobs? And even if there are, what happens before we make those jobs and retrain people? We're going to have a point where we're going to have 10, 50% of our workforce unemployed in 25, 30 years. It's going to be a long time before there are jobs to replace those people. We are facing mass unemployment in the very near future. How do we deal with that as a society? And how do people as individuals deal with that? We know that retirement increases the risk of depression by 40%. I couldn't find stats for redundancy, but imagine what redundancy with the knowledge that you've probably got no job ever again. Imagine what that's going to do to mental health in a society where mental health is already our biggest issue. It's also important to think back to the Industrial Revolution. We look back on the Industrial Revolution, and we think of it as sweeping progress. We think, yeah, there were some little hiccups. But the Industrial Revolution was also a horrible time. It was a time of exploitation. It was a time of the wealthiest almost using the poorest as slaves. And today we still have modern-day slavery. We have mass exploitation through the whole of society. And it was bloody as well. Like, the Industrial Revolution caused the rise of capitalism, the rise of communism. It caused war after war after war as people tried to find ideologies that could answer the questions of what the Industrial Revolution means. It caused tens of millions of deaths. We look back on the Luddites as foolish, but actually, were they foolish? Actually, did they not understand that transitioning a whole economy from one thing to another was maybe harder than a few rich politicians thought? And what will happen this time when actually it's not sort of 10% of people unemployed and everyone else just having to do jobs they don't want, but it's actually 50% of people out of work? So we need to prepare both people and society. We need to be educating children and adults in a way that means they can learn new skills, that they can choose to learn, they can learn. We need to focus on critical thinking in our education system. And we need to prepare as society, as governments, as welfare states. How does a welfare state cope when 50% of your population are giving and 50% are taking? We've currently been trying things like basic income. Many countries have experimented with this. And this is the idea that we give a small amount of money to somebody, enough maybe to put a roof over their head and to keep them fed. But that then they can choose what they do with their time. They can train for new skills, they can go and get a job if they can find one, or they can just relax at home. We don't know whether basic income's going to work or not yet. It's too early to tell. But it's important that society recognizes these challenges and starts experimenting with ideas like this. And maybe this is a positive thing. Maybe this is a future of the rise of the artisan. If everything can be mass-produced at scales we can't even imagine by these robotic AI systems, maybe the thing the human makes with its imperfections is actually the beauty. Maybe as society we start to reward creativity and art and music in a way that we just don't at the moment because it doesn't make people richer. Or maybe the future of humanity is just Netflix and chill. Maybe it's getting back to our animalistic roots and sitting at home and doing whatever, embracing nature, enjoying the world for what it was. Maybe actually work is a burden. But I know for myself that the creativity, the challenge, the risk and reward that work brings are things that give me purpose and drive. If you take that away from me, what does that leave me with? What gets me out of bed in the morning? So what do we do? What are the solutions? Well, the first thing that's important to say is that you do not want to leave this to geeks like me to sort out. This isn't a problem for AI developers or software developers to sort out. This is a problem for society to sort out. We need the sociologists and the psychologists that understand human behavior. We need the business people who are going to have to choose between hiring a robot or hiring a person. We need the doctors who are going to see changes in their healthcare system they cannot imagine. We need the 50% who are going to lose their jobs to have voices, not just to have things imposed on them. This is a problem not just for me, not just for the people that are making this software, but it's a problem for everybody else in society. And we need to come together and experiment. We need to try things. We need to come up with ideas. And we need to discuss and debate, not with AI as some nightmarish hell or as some godlike thing that's going to take over the world or as some hyped-up hoax. It's none of those things. AI isn't complex to understand. It's not difficult. It's not challenging. You can go out there and you can read things on it to understand what AI is, what deep learning is, what the future holds. You can see the debates over the talk I'm having, whether it will remove jobs, whether it won't. But you need to go out there and educate yourselves, and you need to make your voices heard. Artificial intelligence can bring such amazing power to the world. It can potentially cure any disease. It can potentially fix the planet, fix the damage we've done to it. It can potentially get us to Mars and take us across the whole galaxy exploring. The reason I work in artificial intelligence is that, for me, it's the most exciting field you could possibly be in. But it comes with risks, and it comes with dangers. And we cannot be naive to that and let somebody else sort that problem out. The future is in our control. It's in your control. You can choose how the future is shaped for you, for your kids, for the generations to come. But if you just sit by and let other people sort this out, then the rich will get richer, the corporations will have the robots, the poor will get poorer, and the world will not be a fun place to be in. So I urge you, I beg of you, to go and learn, to go and educate yourself, and to debate and to fight and to think about what is right for society. Thank you.